is quite interesting. Again, if you kind of slot it into the whole story of our area, an ancient site, and Hobkirk's book from 1854 onwards, you see, I've just been watching that Truth Stream media video when she speaks a little bit about the Wizard of Oz at the end. I have actually read up about the Wizard of Oz before. So, they published it around 1900, which is just when the Victoria Tower was built or being built. And they would have probably heard about that. Could have had an influence on it, because it would have been like a worldwide, they would have, a lot of people would have known about that. Because they had quite an opening ceremony. But obviously he was, I think he based Emerald City on New York, really. So 1900 fits in precisely exactly with that kind of tower. And there was some, you see, Hobkirk's book would have been, in 5 years, quite circulated. I bet some copies got over to America, Emerald City, green city. It's like green emerald buildings rising up. That's almost like the circle of green trees around the other hill Hobkirk describes, in a way, isn't it? It almost makes you think of Lord of the Rings, Lothlorien, and the other place, Rivendell, in a way. But it's actually buildings, New York's buildings, tall skyscrapers and tall buildings, but it's got that sort of thing about it. But then there's that whole Statue of Liberty thing bit as well. But I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't do you see, this is now how, you've got to understand now how ideas are getting passed around, like Extinction Rebellion do something, and it triggers Just Stop Oil to do something, and then, it triggers, like I do something, or Anonymous does something, or whatever. Everyone's playing off each other's ideas. This figures into it. But this is quite interesting, going back a bit, though. He actually ran a bazaar, Baum's Bazaar, but he went bankrupt because he kept giving stuff away. But he ended up writing a column in the newspaper then. But even though some of his relatives were advocates of supporting Indians, following the death of Sitting Bull at the hands of an Indian agency police, Baum recommended wholesale extermination. So he wrote this, but it was meant to be in satire. This is about the Native Americans, right? This is the guy who wrote The Wizard of Oz, right? He wrote this. 1891 was it? The pioneer has before declared that our only safety depends upon the total extermination of the Indians. Having wronged them for centuries, we had better, in order to protect our civilization, follow it up by one more wrong and wipe these untamed and untamable creatures from the face of the earth. This is unfortunately what I think that Charles and the Royals think of us here. The natives, the natives of Britain, the actual original natives of Britain. I think this is actually what the Royals want to do with the sugar factories and refineries. Because although this is written in satire, total extermination of them. That is what they want to try to do with the sugar refinery, and then bringing in as many immigrants as possible, targeted, not just they're having wronged us for centuries, including not only being wronged by the Roman invasion and then wronged by the Battle of Hastings, multiple other wrongs, multiple other battles. They want to finish us off. In fact, it's us that our natural good nature and agreeability would be the only reason why they've ended up getting in a position where they are, because we let them. we were such a pushover. We can't be that dangerous because, the problem is that we are accommodating and agreeable, but we are some force that can, pull them over to the side on it as well, which is why they vehemently want to wipe us out because, there's no Jeremy Corbyn and George Galloway, even though they're actually being owned and bossed, because they cheat, and we don't cheat. That's the problem. The problem is if you are honest and if you don't cheat, you don't win. That's the problem. I think they want to exterminate us completely because it's a lot easier for them to cheat. The problem is it's easier for them to cheat. They've actually completely and totally mastered cheating the Chinese, the Indians. Well, in America, they've cheated everyone on the planet, and now they're bossing them with their court cases after establishing their products, drinks, McDonald's and KFC globally. And now, it's the only thing standing in their way. They've got them completely and totally under their control and being bossed. The only thing that stands in their way really is the resistance here now, which is the resistance they've been fighting all along. They've been trying to exterminate his history all the way through. So, they try to finish us off now with all the restriction of movement, blah, 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 viruses, microchips. They won't finish until they got right into the core of it, And I've proposed to the Green Party that our site here is the inspiration behind Octavia Hill coming up with that idea for the Green Belt. Also, I think there's something in the Emerald City because it's like green trees, isn't it? Green, going upwards. I'm certain the timing for Wizard of Oz being written also fits in perfectly with it follows on from Hobkirk fitting in. And then you got the Statue of Liberty Island. You got this green belt thing. It's just like what's happening now with Extinction Rebellion. They got the big pink table, and they got the boat thing. People bouncing ideas around. This is what's happening then. So I think Charles is the Wizard of Oz. The guy behind the curtain, the guy behind BlackRock Vanguard. It has to be, doesn't it? I mean, who else? Who else would it be? This fucking Rockefeller. It's BlackRock and Vanguard. Rockefeller. I reckon it's got to be Charles. But if we don't know, if we haven't seen the documents and the will and everything, they've got it set up so I think they can switch around and, if push comes to shove, they can just say that it's anyone. I think it's almost like pass the parcel. I think it's like a hot coal. It's almost like the BlackRock is a hot coal and they can just pass it around, It's difficult to establish who actually is ultimately in charge of it. And I think that, Charles likely will pass that call over to Andrew or something. That's what he's doing at the moment to take the heat off, isn't it? We've gotten pulled up on this whole sugar thing. I mean, I don't know how long they can keep on going ignoring it for and just ploughing on ahead, because Starmer seems to be ploughing on ahead, completely ignoring the Al Jazeera investigations. So, it's we're up against ignorance. Criminals are running this country. There's something definitely in this anyway. I was just put the 1900. Look at this. It looks like Glastonbury Tor, that, doesn't it, when you look out of Glastonbury Tor? It looks exactly like Glastonbury Tor. You see, I never thought about that before, the Emerald City, but he did live sort of just out of New York, didn't he? But he ended up, I think they moved out to the desert at one point, which is what inspired the book. But I think he's buried over the other side. He ended up Los Angeles side, other side of America. But the whole, you see this thing green rising up. It's like tree. Why green? Well, it's like emerald, isn't it? Emerald's green for trees, but yeah, it's a city. It's like almost like a tree city, but it's definitely got elements of this Rivendell and Lothlorien about it. And we know Tolkien was dabbling with his Lord of the Rings. You know, I think that that Hobkirk book must have gotten around, because the earliest copy, the sign that I've seen, actually author's copy signed, was 1854. And then that tower got built in 1900. But there were other design. There were multiple designs. There were loads and loads of designs submitted for loads and loads of different towers. Funnily enough, I haven't seen them all. I'd like to see them all. The Ramsden estate. I've seen about 3 of them. I've seen about 3 of the designs, but there was a load entered. I'd love to see all of them. It's almost like all the different designs for the towers built up that were going to be on there. You know what I mean? They had a competition. There actually was a competition. I wonder if it was only local people who entered, or I wonder if people entered from all over. That would be interesting, because then it would almost be like a collection of all the designs of the towers that got entered. And the date of it is absolutely on the tick, isn't it? It's on the fucking clock stroke. You know, this is ideological investigation. This is historical investigation of events and ideas and people passing around. This is fact. These are facts, events. People did this, people did that. What is the idea? What is the archetype? At what time did they get the idea? What was being published? What was being passed around? There is a science to this. You know, you don't pull it from nowhere. It's not John Pipson Squiggle coming up with a diddly diddly doodah of a trowel embedded in a hoof of a fucking kangaroo. It's a fucking city rising up out of multiple towers, right? When they're building a tower on a notable hill, and there's books being published about it, and they're having a competition to see who can design, for a competition to design what tower it's going to get built, and there are multiple entries, and it gets narrowed down to 2 or 3, and then they ended up choosing one. But also the other site that featured in the book by Hobkirk that was published and circulated around, miraculously spurned the idea for Liberty Island by the French, which was built on Liberty shape, exact same dimensions, is not a coincidence. It's got a ring of green trees around it and banks on the side, which actually, this is an Octavia Hill comes up with the idea for the green belt around green ring of trees. Over in America, people in the writing, he was into newspapers, this guy. He was into tabloids and newspapers, writing columns, reading newspapers, writing newspapers, journalism, right? He's not prating about, you know. This is, you know, I mean, there is, you know, I don't think people think about people. Oh, you know, people talk, people read, people have ideas, people go and do their own work. I mean, when you look at history, it's all the current historians are very kind of compartmentalized. Like, oh, in 1655, Napoleon Bonaparte, blah blah blah, drew his troops up and set off and sailed the ship, and then they took the bay, and this is it. You know, it lacks imagination, as Tolkien would say, or well, actually, Tolkien. I think Tolkien did say that, but also, you know, Ian Fleming. People like Fleming, you know, and Tolkien. They come out with these things, you know. They're lacking imagination. These people weren't lacking imagination, but where'd you get your ideas from? Usually, contests, competitions, reading, writing. What is happening in the world? What's in the newspaper? What's happening in England? What's happening in America? They put a Statue of Liberty up there. Someone's published a book. Now there's another guy publishing a book, The Wizard of Oz, and it's a bestseller. Now there happens to be one buried under the Mechanics Institute in the centre of town. You see, I did not actually think of that. And then there's a tram station that they put out to it. They built the tram station out there to go see it. It's almost like a ring of trees around, but it's also got the emblem symbol of the multiple tower designs. I want to see all those tower designs. And then it ends up getting buried and forgotten, So see, in that one, it's almost like if you look straight down on it, it would almost look like a green belt, wouldn't it? The dates are bang on. The dates are bang on. The ideas and archetypes fit. You would have to look at every single newspaper that were published in America at the time and see if it had been mentioned, what had been said. Have they got the... I can't remember when radio started being knocked around. Oh, about 1890. It's generally recognised that the first radio transmission was made from a temporary station set up by Guillermo Marconi in 1895 on the Isle of Wight. Oh, the Isle of Wight. You've got to be taking the piss. The Isle of Wight. This followed on from pioneering work in the field of a number of people. So, by 1895, they were broadcasting radio, and then, 5 years after that, surely. (1922) officially, so it's a little bit later. So they're not doing widespread radio broadcasting, but they've probably got telegram. They had telegrams, didn't they? It wasn't until 1920 when they did the first. But it says here they were doing some minimal broadcasting, experimental and pioneering in Isle of Wight. The Isle of Wight, 1895, which is 5 years before that Wizard of Oz book was written, 5 years before the tower was built. 1850. So it's quite a few years after the book. There's definitely publishing and books going around anyway, and they had telegrams. They were doing Morse code and sending telegram messages. When's the telegram era? Um, 1870, it is argued this service was not as innovative as the electric telegraph technology underpinned it. The appearance stamp, the mailing increased the volume of letters from 67 million in 1839, 741 million in 1865. 1865, so that was still 1854, 50, 65, 50. So that's like in 50, something like 15 years. So they had telegrams. They were sending telegrams. Telegrams were flying around all over the place. England, America, and they had the press, the newspaper, books were being published, and telegrams being sent, messages. So they were in contact over America. So, you know,